Thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll get started in a minute on the Women in Mining Arizona chapter dig-in webinar. Just giving everyone a few minutes to join in. Maybe 10 more seconds. All right, I think we'll get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Megan, and I am the Education Outreach Chair for the Women in Mining Arizona chapter. First, the chapter would like to say welcome and thank you for joining us for today's talk about water rights and Freeport-McMoRan's strategy on climate change and drought. Before getting started, we wanted to give a brief introduction to our organization and why we are hosting these talks. The Women Mining Arizona chapter, or WIM Arizona, is a nonprofit organization with 5 objectives, one of which is to educate our members and the public on technology, economic, regulatory, and other mining related topics. These monthly dig-in webinars are part of our efforts to meet this commitment. We'd like to give a brief thank you to our overall sponsor of the WIM Arizona chapter, as a platinum sponsor, Freeport-McMoRan. And now I will hand it over to Mario, who will introduce our speaker today.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mario Munoz. I am the Education Outreach Chair here for the Women in Mining Board. Now I'll be introducing Sandy. Sandy Fabritz has served as the Director of Water Strategy for Freeport-McMoRan for the past 8 years and is responsible for the company's water supplies and management of water rights, water acquisition, conservation, and water supply sustainability across its portfolio. Sandy is a former director for the Arizona Department of Water Resources and has been in water management for nearly 30 years, including work in water regulation and water resources planning for the state of Arizona and Freeport. Sandy works with government agencies and leaders at local, state, and federal levels on water supplies issues and has led efforts on drought management, tribal water settlements, groundwater management, and Colorado River issues in the Southwest. She is a member of the Colorado Water Congress, the Arizona-Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan Advisory Committee, and the Arizona-Colorado River Consultation Steering Committee, focused on developing strategies to mitigate climate and drought risks to water supplies across that basin. Sandy is a graduate from Arizona State University and as a native Arizonian understands what it is to live and thrive in an arid environment and is committed to sustainable water management and cooperative water resources development for all water users. Sandy, thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mario. Thanks everybody for the opportunity to be here today. To just give you a sort of brief overview of Freeport-McMoRan's water management and water supply strategies. And obviously, I guess we'll take questions at the end, but this is helpful for everybody, or at least somewhat interesting. It is to me, and I'm kind of a water geek, so I apologize, I get excited about certain things that other people really don't, but water being, I never really thought I would be in water. I had many other plans for my career, but ended up falling into water as an intern at the state of Arizona and back in 1990, and haven't really recovered from that. So, so here is, let me share my screen, get that. If I can get this. Sorry, I'm not perfect at this. Can you see my screen?
We can see the screen, but it's not in
the presentation. Well, that's fine. We will just shift it over here. How's that? Let me just try it again. Sorry about this. We'll do it this way. There we go. I think that will work.
we see the presentation through the panels, but not
Alright,
the full.
That's
full
fine.
screen.
We'll do the other one then. I don't like the other one, but we'll do it right. There we go. Now you should see it.
There we go.
Good. Figure out how to get this off, but that's fine. Let me jump to my screen. All right. Just a qualifying statement about what we're presenting here today. Obviously, many of the statements that I'm going to be making are forward-looking statements. There are plans that we are implementing or look to implement. Our risk factors are, anything described under our risk factors are reported every year to the SEC and other. Some of the assumptions are likely to change over time. I've done the qualifier. We can send this to you if you want to read it in more detail, but we've done our job. Just a real quick overview of Freeport's assets. So we have global assets around the world. It includes operations in North America, in Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. These are active operations. We have other closed operations that we also are managing water supplies for, many others. We have 2 operations in South America, one in Peru and one in Chile, and then our Indonesian operation. Sort of set the stage of where we're talking about. As far as water goes, Freeport's, we believe that effective water stewardship means really maximizing the water use efficiencies at our operations and reusing and maximizing reuse of water to minimize our use of freshwater supplies coming into our operations, and supplies that could be in competition with communities, tribal entities, and the environment. Access to water is a fundamental human right. That is the basis of everything we do in our water strategy. It's important for our communities, it's very important for our environment, and we recognize that in all our strategies. Our global objective is to identify and manage and mitigate both our current and future water-related risks. And really the only way we can really get to that, and what's really fun about this, this world that we work in water, is our ability to work with others in a regional and even a local scale to find solutions for the long term. Just a real brief sort of just give you a high level overview of how water, how the water regulations in the state of Arizona have kind of evolved. This is very, very general. I mean, there's a lot of different decrees and lawsuits and statutory requirements that have occurred over the years, but it really has evolved from the early 40s when large-scale mining began. In the 50s, there was also, a lot of people don't realize, there was a very, very challenging drought in the region of the scale that we're looking at right now. But the competition for water supplies was low. We had lower populations, more dense population, or less dense populations in most of the regions. And so there was plenty of water at that time to sort of go around. But in really starting in the 60s, with the environmental movement and really looking at what our priorities were as communities, as managers, as water managers, environmental managers, we really started to question, what the priorities were for using water, how we were using water, and what would be the best approach to utilizing those supplies. It started coming to head in litigation in the 1970s when the general stream adjudication in Arizona began. That is a filing that is still active today to quantify and prioritize the water supplies in our rivers, particularly in the Gila system, the Gila River system, and in the Little Colorado River system. This did not include the Colorado River. That is done separately, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that really started initiating sort of this, really taking a hard look at how much water people were using and who was there first using the water. And that's important because the basis of Western water law is prior appropriation. And that's first in time, first in right. So those who were here first have the highest priority and priority before those who came later. Now, some of that's been relitigated and resettled with tribal communities and recognition of their, that they were here well before any of us. And so a lot of the settlements are really focused on getting them their priorities above everybody else. So that all started to occur in the 70s. And then in 1980 was really important act for the state of Arizona was the Groundwater Management Act. And that's where the state really started getting proactive and in managing groundwater supplies in particular, and started actually applying restrictions on how people were using water and where they could use water and in what volumes. In the 90s, water transportation became an issue as populations grew. There became more stresses on some of the rural parts of the state where the large cities were looking to expand their water supply portfolios. And so there were restrictions applied to transportation, particularly of groundwater, in the groundwater or in the Water Transportation Act of 1991. And then obviously in the 20s, and some would say even as early as 1999, we really started going into this current drought that we've been experiencing. And that we built a drought plan with the state of Arizona in the year 2000 and 2001. So a lot of attention started being paid to that. A lot of work on the Colorado between the states in sharing in shortages. Most of that stuff started right about then and has been evolving since then. In the 2010s and 2020s, Freeport really started focusing its efforts on looking to renewable and alternative water supplies, and then focusing on the sustainability of those supplies, not just for ourselves, but for the communities in which we operate and where our water supplies come from. Part of our process in looking at our water supplies and our water is evaluating and monitoring our water supply balance from year to year. We use analytical desktop modeling. We also use hydrologic modeling to evaluate our water supplies and the sustainability of those supplies, not just for our mining operations, but for the regions in which we're drawing those supplies from. With information, we can identify opportunities for efficiency improvements, and then also where we can potentially maximize reuse within our operations, or identification of alternative water supplies that can help reduce our renewable supply footprint. There's really our water management practices are sort of a two-pronged approach. We really focus inside the mines of how water is used, where it's used, where and how, or if it's stored, and how it's reused, and in some circumstances, whether or not it's discharged or how it's discharged. And then outside the mine, where many of our water supplies originate, that location is extremely important in the realm of possible or accessibility to the water supply. Who else is using that water supply if somebody else is dependent on that supply, and really who's going to hold you accountable for what you're doing, and really developing our strategy around working in those areas in a cooperative manner. It really has directed us. So that's really a simplified version of our water management strategy. So as we look look at our water supplies and do our annual evaluation of our water supplies. This is, and an annual is really, it's really an ongoing evaluation. We're constantly monitoring water supplies, looking at, impacts, looking at climate impacts, everything that could potentially impact our water supplies and supplies of our communities around us. While we have ample water to support our current operations globally, a lot of our supplies come with some risk. I mentioned the adjudication and with it the legal risk that brings as we're working through the court system to quantify and prioritize or demonstrate our priority in our water supplies. That process, it's like I said, it started in the 70s, and it's 50 years later, we're still slogging through that process. But it does bring a risk of an uncertainty of what supplies that people will have in the future, and then it's the same issue for us. So as we're looking at water supplies, we have to look beyond just that, what our current supplies are. It makes us be more proactive in evaluating other water supplies. But all water supplies bring with it a level of physical risk to it. Drought, declining water tables if you're using groundwater. And I think everybody who works in water, these are just the very standard risks that we all have to evaluate against. And then for mines in particular, this social license to operate, really how the community, how we interact with the community, how our water supplies impact or bring value to a community. And that's really becoming more and more of really it's an opportunity in our mind to work with these communities. But it does bring a level of risk to our water supplies as we continue to develop those supplies or continue to use our existing supplies. Really, our goal overall is to protect our ongoing water supplies against these risks. And one really neat way to do that is providing new alternative water supplies for our, to replace either our existing uses or for mine expansions. Now, those water supplies, we coming to grips with the fact that, and I think this is something we all in the water world have to come to grips with, is the cheap, easy sources of water they're not there, or they're not going to be there in the long term. And we really have to start being more thoughtful and willing to find those and develop those alternative sources. And they do come with a risk or a cost. It is a higher cost than what we're used to paying for. As we look at each of our sites, and I'm not going to go into this too deeply, we sort of talked about it on the previous slide, we really do evaluate continuously each of our operations and the major risks that we've identified here, climate change, legal, water scarcity, flooding, and competition. We're constantly evaluating that for each of our operations. And to really address these things to manage the supplies and really develop our strategy, we've sort of got a three-pronged effort. Some of these things we've already been implementing, and some of these things are new. And so our overall objective here is to transition to renewable supplies. So reduce our use of non-renewable supplies like groundwater and really start moving our operations to renewable supplies. The Colorado River, which is, people will probably roll their eyes at and say, well, that's not a renewable supply, or, that's dangerous. It has risks in and of itself. All these supplies have risks. We'll be very clear about that, but it is a renewable supply that definitely has a lot of competition on it, and, lots of stresses on it, but it's a very highly regulated and managed river that has a lot of storage on it, and has done a wonderful job of really moving things or supplying the amount of people that it supplies. So, and then also ocean desal or brackish groundwater desal, looking at those supplies as potential sources of water for either current operations or future expansions of our operations. one of our highest focus really is maximizing the reuse of alternative supplies. When I talk about alternative supplies, what I'm really focused on is municipal effluent and on-site water reuse within our own operations, and developing those sources of supply for the mine, thereby releasing or making the local water supplies available for local communities or regional projects, making water available and reducing our impact to those, our volumetric impact to those supplies. And really working with communities and developing regional outline. I think it's timing me over. Developing those supplies with a regional focus is what we really want to do. So not again, and I can't stress this enough, working with the communities and stakeholders that that we're near, or that we're, provide opportunities that we can, create really good water management and water supply, develop water supplies for regions. And then because of drought and climate change, really improving our source reliability, looking at reservoir storage, increasing our capacity for reservoir storage, using artificial recharge as a component of our water supply strategies, and then also water exchanges, which is very unique to Arizona. There are laws in place that allow for water exchanges, which have created some really imaginative ways of moving water and developing supplies from a regional perspective. All right, it wants to go that side, so we will. I wanted to give a couple of examples of things that we've done. Cerro Verde is our operation in Peru. It's located 20 miles southwest of the city of Arequipa, which is the second largest city in Peru. We had an expansion about 5 or 6 years ago that basically tripled production, and also required, additional sources of water. We had to work very diligently with the community and very creatively with the community to bring, or to prove, and really, because we needed more water, we had to be very cooperative with the community. Not that we wouldn't otherwise, it's just, there's a lot of things that kind of go into what we did there. One of the projects that we worked on was improving their water treatment plant. They had one small water treatment plant, and we upgraded that and built a new treatment plant for them to be able to improve the health and safety of the community, and improve the water supply conditions for that community from the local river that supplies most of the water there. But the biggest thing one of the things that was really great that we were able to work with the community on was the development of a wastewater treatment plant. And in the US, it's kind of commonplace, but in this particular situation, only 10% of the water sewage coming out of that city was actually treated at any kind of a wastewater treatment plant. The city of over 1 million people was essentially discharging raw sewage into the local river, which runs right through the middle of town and supplies water downstream farmers. We worked out an agreement with them where we would construct and pay for a wastewater treatment facility with enough capacity to treat the remaining 90% of the sewage coming out of the city, and thereby providing a source of water to the mine itself, that now provides about 50% of that mine's water supplies. It's a wonderful, community-driven, very proactive. It's just a really cool project that we were able to be a part of, and has really improved the conditions in that area. And not only has it improved the water quality in the river, but human health and the quality of life. It's enhanced the environmental flows in that river and the riparian areas along that river. Downstream farmers that were historically supplying or irrigating out of the river now have clean water to irrigate with and can actually export their crops where they were limited in being able to do that because of the quality of the water. But for us, it was the development of this new alternative and very renewable supply that is also pretty much drought proof. And the drought proof comes from, you know, the water's going in the treatment plant. People are going to do what people do. As long as there's people in the area, we're going to have a pretty secure source of water. But this is an example of the win-win that we want to do in all our projects moving forward. Another effort that we have underway is really increasing our reuse of water on site. So water that we've got pooling on site is, and really taking a look at a very granular level, where that water is, what's the quality of that water, and then evaluating process by process at each and every operation, the water quality needs for each process, the volume of water needed for each process, and trying to align that with the existing sources of water and bringing in treatment, whether it's a small plant treatment for particular processes or commingling of supplies to improve the water quality and make it usable within our operations. This project is hopefully going to be something that's going to be a big win for Freeport, but also again for the communities at large as we reduce our footprint on bringing freshwater sources in. No water talk would be complete without mentioning the Colorado River. And we all are aware, and I think have seen any number of articles on the Colorado River and its vulnerability and what's going on with both Glen Canyon in particular and Hoover Dam or Lake Mead and Lake Powell, and the declines in those in the water availability on the system because of drought and climate change. The river itself is split into two as far as management. So you have the upper basin, which includes Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico, and a little sliver of Arizona too. And then the lower basin, which is California, Arizona, and Nevada. And then you also have obligations to Mexico, who also has an allocation out of the river. The river is highly variable. The flows range from 5 million acre feet to 25 million acre feet. That's why we have constructed storage on that river. We're reclamation, the department or the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. All these dams are their projects, and significant amounts of water are stored on the river. Between Lake Mead and Lake Powell, the maximum storage is 50 million acre feet. And really, this river's a workhorse, and it has been very good at with all that storage. We've managed our way through 20 years of drought, over 20 years of drought. Well, now with resource, as populations grow and needs grow, we're really starting to see the system stressed. And what we have now is a declaration of shortage for 2022, or a tier 1 shortage. And that tier 1 shortage impacts in particular Arizona and the Central Arizona project. And we actually do have supplies of Central Arizona project for our operations. This is all information that's out there on CAP and DWR's website, but we actually use a significant amount of Colorado River. The priority of the river is, you have a block of water, about 1.5 million acre feet available to Central Arizona, and it's prioritized from top to bottom, and with the bottom being the highest priority sources of water. And just sort of noted where our supplies kind of fall in the mix there. Most of our supplies are in M&I and in the M&I and Indian Pool. And through this complicated spaghetti mix of agreements and just efforts by the Department of Water Resources and the Central Arizona project to bring ag, uni, industrial, private utilities, tribal entities, environmental entities all together to solve the or at least get us hopefully through this drought, at least to start us through getting through this drought. We've managed to get into a position where we will not see, we Freeport and will not see a shortage to our supplies in a tier 1 shortage. Now, we agreed to supply some of our water to the agricultural communities so that their shortage, because they were subject to shortage, just based on that priority pool and the tiers and how they work. But we along with the city of Phoenix, EPCOR, which is a private utility, and other cities provided water to the farmers to help mitigate some of that impact to them. So it's a very cooperative system. Even though we're looking at shortages, to the system, we're all working together to find ways to either mitigate those shortages or keep water in Lake Mead to reduce the likelihood of shortages in the future. So these are efforts that are going to continue for as long as it takes, and they'll be modified to address whatever the needs are at the time, as long as folks continue to cooperate and work together, which is I don't have any doubt about that, at least within Arizona. So there'll be more to come on that, but it is a very complicated work in progress to keep people at least either semi-whole or be able to definitely supply water to the cities in particular as we move forward through this drought. This is important for us. This is one example of how we use our Colorado River Farmers Investment Company, or FICO, is for those of you who are in the Tucson area or drive down to Nogales along I-19. There's a really large pecan growing operation there to the east of the freeway. We partnered with them to put in place a pipeline essentially from the end of the CAP canal. So where the CAP canal ends today, right here, so the canal comes all the way through Arizona and ends here. We built a pipeline in cooperation with FICO. Freeport funded the 65% of that pipeline, and from that, we are able to bring CAP water into the Green Valley area. Right now, we're storing it underground at the FICO groundwater savings facility. But this is the first CAP water that's come into this area south of Tucson, an area that has some significant water level declines. And so this is yet another example of a project that's really aimed at getting water to the mine, but also improving the conditions within the communities that we operate. And I'm sure many of you already know underground storage and recovery and what it is. I keep this in here just as a reminder for others who aren't as familiar with it. But essentially, what you're doing is you're storing water in the aquifer, and then using wells to pump that water out in generally the same location. The law allows you to pump the water out anywhere in the same groundwater basin. We're trying to limit all our recovery to those areas that are closer to our mine, or closer to the location of storage. Sorry. And then water exchange. This just I know it's an ugly, hideous map of sorts, but it really is an example of long-term water exchanges. Phelps Dodge, actually, all the way back to the 40s, is really where water exchanges came into play in Arizona. Phelps Dodge helped construct the spillways at Horseshoe Dam to help the city of Phoenix and Salt River Project. And in exchange for that, we were able to take water off of the Black River, which is upstream of, obviously, Roosevelt Dam. And by taking this water out of the Black River, we're able to supply Morenci. And so we're actually using water, that we normally wouldn't have access to but we provided water over here to the Phoenix area. So they're allowing some of their water to go to Morenci. Today, we're doing it a little differently. We're using the CAP canal, storing water in the Salt River Project service area, and now pulling water out of the Black River that we can call CAP water. And that water is then transported through Willow Creek and Eagle Creek to Morenci. So it's a really neat tool, and it really does provide a lot of operational flexibility to move water around the state. And it's becoming much more commonplace, but its origins that a lot of people don't know really started in mining with that horseshoe exchange and with Phelps Dodge, City of Phoenix, SRP, and actually the Department of Defense. So still a history lesson there for you. Again, I can't stress enough really what all this comes down to is our commitment to our communities. We work actively and engage actively. We invest in our communities. As you can see there, our total investment in 2020, our communities are where we live. We work in those communities, we live in those communities. And so we're not doing things to the detriment of those communities. We want to do our work and meet our objectives cooperatively with those communities. And through constructive dialogue, we build our relationships with them and gain understanding with their needs and their perceived, how we're impacting them, with whether it's perceived or actual impacts, but working those challenges. And community is a large word. It's not just cities and towns, it's tribal entities, it's state level, it's federal level. So it's a small word, but has a big meaning. And it is the core value of our water strategy. And that really is building that commitment in the community cooperative or the cooperative community projects and regional projects. Just to wrap up, again, we recognize our operations have the impacts, whether they're economic, social, or environmental. But through collaboration and proactive engagement, we look to build partnerships to solve problems. Not just for ourselves, but for the communities and the regions in which we operate. So with that, I can take questions, I think.
Thank you so much for this talk. We have a lot of questions and may not necessarily get to them all right now, but we've got them documented down, and we'll get them to Sandy after this to hopefully be able to answer if we don't get you today. So how about we start with far away? Do you use ocean water desalination plants in your operations in Chile?
We don't currently use desal water in our active operation at El Abra today. We've been evaluating it and looking into it. We did build a desal facility for a former operation that we had at, I think it was Candelaria was what it was called, and we did build a desal facility. And that mine, which we subsequently sold, is still using ocean water today. So it's something that we've done in the past and we're looking to do in the future. It's just a long-term evaluation process that we have to go through.
On that, a lot of the questions do definitely go around that. What are some of the efforts ongoing to transition to desalination? When can we expect to hear more?
Well, that's not up to me, obviously. That is an investment decision of the company. So I think there's a lot of trade-off studies that need to go into that, and getting through those trade-off studies and finding the right way to do it. And so, yeah, more to come, but I'll let you know. I'm looking forward to it myself. So.
What type of challenges did you guys face to get a win-win about water at Cerro Verde project?
That's a great question, and it wasn't an easy process. I'll tell you that. It is a very, as many of you know, mining brings with it its own sort of challenges in operating within communities and building trust and building sort of the willingness to cooperate, and what you're recommending is letting them go through their process of something's up here, and just getting through that normal building the trust phase and keeping that trust. Just being completely transparent with them on our needs and why we needed it and the value that brings to the community, and our desire really to improve the conditions in the community. I think we're really part of that. We initiated that first with helping them with the water treatment facilities. So we started to gain ground there, and then really bringing in all of the stakeholders, and really just, again, going back to transparency, and they just have to get comfortable with what you're saying, that you're telling them the truth. And and then once you get into it and you do it, then doing what you're saying you're going to do. We have a lot of monitoring. We actually provide a location within the city where they can look on a computer and see that moment, how much water is flowing into and out of that treatment facility. So we're not gobbling all the water out of that treatment facility. We are releasing some of that back to the river for downstream users. And the community has access to that 24/7. We don't get many people looking at it, but it's there and they know it's there. So, I mean, it's just the little things that really build that trust and bring, and then really following through on what you say you're going to do.
Great. Along with that construction, did that also include sewer and collection systems to bring the effluent from the community into the new plant?
It did. It was a significant project to build, I'm going to say 4 or 5 collection facilities and infrastructure to get that water, rather than having it discharged to the river, getting it into the collection facilities and then over to the treatment plant, which is actually located just below the mine. And it comes off the river, goes into the treatment plant, and or comes into the collection facilities to the plant itself, and then it's discharged. It goes 2 ways. Some goes to the mine and some gets discharged to the river, back into the river as clean water.
For other ideas, do any of the sites have rainwater harvesting projects, or is that something being considered?
It's certainly being considered. I mean, we have to manage stormwater. That's definitely part of the mining management on the site, is managing stormwater and keeping that stormwater clean. We don't want it getting into impaired sources of water, and trying to keep that and being able to shed clean water in the instances where we can do that. And so there's some component of that. Looking at maybe stormwater recharge, those are some of the things that we're evaluating. Enhanced stormwater recharge, trying to get it back in the aquifer as clean water available to the region and not just to us. So a lot of work around that.
Another question came in that I find quite interesting. So depending on the location, you've got some mine infrastructure that could be quite old. What actions are being done for kind of monitoring water loss, if any, and conservation and fixing that?
That's a great question, because we really just recently have developed a water conservation program that we want to start rolling out to our mines, that really focuses on losses and reuse of water, and reuse and recycling of water, and really managing the supplies that we have and improving efficiencies within the operations. All the sites they do track losses. We're improving in the area of monitoring and doing monitoring to be able to capture losses, the unseen losses, which are really the big ones. And so that's part of our water conservation strategy, is to really start narrowing in on some of those bigger losses in the system. But we're also looking at upgrading a lot of that old infrastructure. In my, coming from my background from the state of Arizona, the cost of infrastructure is just can kind of blow your mind. It's amazing how much infrastructure that we have it may be old, but it is still in good condition. The mines and putting in stainless steel infrastructure in places that just, really bolsters it, and it lasts a long time. So, a lot of our infrastructure is in pretty good condition, but where we need to upgrade and improve, like even wells, well improvements and things like that, pump improvements, we're doing that. That's a constant, everyday activity going on at all our operations.
This is great. So let's see what else we got in here. We've got a lot of this answered so far. So one that's come up quite a few times, and hopefully one we can help answer pretty easily. Is this presentation something that could be available on the Women in Mining website afterwards?
I'll have to check on that, but I'll let you know.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. So looking at the time, it looks like we're getting kind of close to being done. We do still have questions, but we've copied them down, and we'll get back to you if your name was attached to it. So I want to say thank you again so much, Sandy, for this. As one of our 2022 presenters, the Arizona chapter of Women in Mining will be sending you a neat little new coffee mug that we've designed. It'll have the Women in Mining and the Dig In information on it as a thank you gift. We also want to invite any WIM Arizona members interested in joining one of our 8 subcommittees to reach out to us via social media or email. WIM is entirely run by members who volunteer their time to help advance our objectives. Getting involved with leadership is a great way to give back, use and grow your skills, and engage with your fellow WIM Arizona members and our stakeholders. We have our annual planning meeting coming up. Oh, actually, some more follow-up to the annual planning meeting. And we have an in-person event coming up, as well as our annual elections. We're active on social media, and you can reach out to us there or via email. We'll put up our email in the chat as well. Our chapter's website is also updated on a regular basis with information that may be of interest. So I want to thank everyone for attending, and Sandy for your presentation. This was one of our best attended events so far, so thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for letting me be here today. I really do appreciate it.